Alright, so welcome. So just a bit of a different kind of video today. I just want to talk for a bit and just kind of give my thoughts. Basically, three main ways to set up a pivot on a folder. There's ball bearings, there's phosphor bronze washers, and then there's Teflon slash nylon washers. I'm just going to group them together here for convenience. I couldn't really tell you a difference anyways. But back to the point here, when you really think about it, there are only two correct ways to do a knife pivot. There's ball bearings, and there's phosphor bronze washers. And that's because Teflon is just completely inferior. Teflon is what that cheap Chinese crap uses. There's no reason to ever use Teflon, and I think a lot of people out there will tell you the exact same thing. You can't get a blade on Teflon to be as smooth as, let's say, this Jim Burke right here. Just look at how that huge blade just glides on that pivot. Wish you could feel this kind of smoothness through the screen here. Teflon's also just not strong enough. A hard use folder like this Demco Custom 8015 right here, everything about this is built to last. This thing will probably outlast me. On something like this, you need the pivot set up on something that can handle the abuse and not shred over the years. In cases where like reliability is a problem, then you need something like this Borka stitch right here. Take a look at how reliable that action is. Would you put your life in the hands of a knife on Teflon? Let me tell you this right now. The action on this stitch is something I would trust my life on. You also just can't make a good flipper out of it. It's just not smooth enough. You always get that kind of stick-slip sort of feel about it. If you want a clean, snappy action like this Mosier backlash right here, you need to ditch the cheap plastic. I mean, just listen to this thing ring. Even an action snob like myself can't complain about this one. Let's say you're not even after speed here. Let's say you just want to go slow. Then tell me, how would you get a perfect, stupid smooth, smoother than a Sebenza action like this Barker Hokkaido right here? Can Teflon do this? This here out-smooths a Sebenza hands down. Even Hinderer, the man has historically stuck to his guns and insisted on Teflon. Even he has seen the light and given us the tri-way pivot that you get right here on his full track model. The knife even ships with ball bearings pre-installed to give us an action like this right here. Can you do this on Teflon? I don't know. I see no reason to use Teflon on anything. Just no reason at all. Let's go put this down right here. But you know what? Here's the part that's going to blow your mind. Everything that you've seen on the screen so far has been running on Teflon. Just take a look at it. It brings some light into here. See it peeking out right here. See a little bit right there. And this one as well. And this full track right here. This one shipped with bearings pre-installed. That is 100% true. And I know that because those bearings are right over here. And right next to it, the phosphor bronze washers. I took that thing apart and I put the Teflon washers in myself. Can you tell? I'm sick of seeing this. I'm getting real sick of it. People just take their opinions and preferences, they just pass them off as cold hard facts, and then if they have enough of a community, then I watch as like the entire knife community just goes out there and parrots them ad nauseum. Sometimes it's necessary change, other times it's just plain stupid. Like recently, I've been seeing this move away from cheap plastic washers. And let me just get this out of the way. I'm not any kind of expert here. I think I've made that clear before. I'm just a guy with a problem. I spent a stupid amount of cash to just kind of experience everything out there in this crazy hobby. I'm basically an addict. I'm also not exactly a material scientist. So I'm not going to give you hard numbers or anything like that. I didn't come here to do math. That's not what I want to do with my hobby. But I do see the bigger picture here because I've handled more knives than most, and most people honestly should. If you, yeah, don't do what I do. You'll go broke. But having a knife on Teflon doesn't automatically lessen the quality of it. It's like everything else out there; it just needs to be done well. And you know what? I've had terrible knives on Teflon before, same as most people. But you know what else I've had? I've had knives on ball bearings that didn't flip worth a damn. I've had knives on phosphor bronze that didn't flip worth a damn. None of this is mutually exclusive. It's more difficult to do a Teflon pivot right, that's true, but just because you had a knife on Teflon and it didn't run right doesn't mean that it's the material's fault. It just wasn't done right. There's no sense in blaming the material for the mistakes of the manufacturer. If you have a Teflon washer that's shredded, then there was a mistake on the maker's side. It's not just because all Teflon is bad. And I just want to talk about Teflon here for a second because there's a lot of bad info out there. We're leaving bearings out for now. Bearings versus washers, that's a whole nother thing that's been going on for years now. I'm not going to get into that here. But let's just talk about washers. Namely, phosphor bronze versus Teflon. A big point that other people like to make is, I can't find a thing that Teflon does better than phosphor bronze, so phosphor bronze is the better option. Well, let me just take a little time here and tell you what Teflon does better. For one, it's the better hard use option. It's a synthetic material, so it can't corrode like phosphor bronze can. It's also more flexible, so it's less likely to fold or deform. And the most important thing, it's self-lubricating. If you were to clean out your gunked up folding knife out in the field like some people like to fantasize about, it will hold up better and be smoother than a phosphor bronze knife. Next thing is, it does the job of a washer or thrust bearing or whatever the hell you want to call it better. It does it better. The job of a washer is to let two materials rotate against each other with minimal wear. Teflon is a softer material, it's softer than phosphor bronze. So it better protects the steel and the titanium. It'll wear into them less over time, basically. Another big complaint about Teflon is you just can't get a good action on it. People like to talk about this all the time. They say like the knife running on Teflon can't be as smooth. It'll have like a stick slip kind of action. It can't flip well. It can't hold up over time. You know what? I just showed you guys about half a dozen counterexamples where Teflon is done right. The material isn't inherently bad. It's just different. And going with what knife makers say about Teflon, it actually has a lower coefficient of friction. Like Jason Guthrie right here. He swears by this stuff. And he has built the knives to back up his argument. I'm just going to find a place for this. And but from my experience, phosphor bronze is just the easier material to work with. It breaks in over time, and it gives you an action a lot easier. Again, no science backing this up, but just experience here. But to me, it feels like once a blade on phosphor bronze gets going, it wants to keep going, and then the friction that's acting on it kind of goes down. Whereas on Teflon, it seems like you constantly have that whatever number of friction working on the blade the entire time. I know, we're working with highly scientific terms here, but just try and keep up. What I mean is, while Teflon is smoother, you end up needing more to get it open. That seems to be the biggest difference to me. I don't know if what I said makes sense to anyone else. I swear to you, it sounded better in my head, I'll promise you that. But, yeah, anyways, moving on. I'm not saying that the action is bad on a Teflon knife. Just take a look at this David Mosier right here. This guy managed to do this on Teflon. I've had custom ball bearing flippers that didn't flip half as well as his backlash here. And just in case you need me to say it, that pivot is tight. There's no side to side play here, not even when it's unlocked. Same as this Burke right here. These two are perfect actions running on tight pivots. You know, the funny thing about those two and a few others, I've actually bought more than a few flippers on Teflon from people at huge discounts. Like, I'd asked about the knife and then, like, I'll give them, or just straight up give them, like, an I'll take it or something like that. And before they would even answer my question or give me payment info, they would just warn me multiple times that the knife did not flip. And you know what? I know why they do it. Because, you know, buyers can be divas and scumbags sometimes. So the guy selling the knife is terrified that I'm going to be sleazy and ask for cash back to make up for the emotional trauma of a bad action, or threaten to force a refund by opening up a PayPal case or something like that. That's not me. I take it anyways. It arrives, and you know what? It really didn't flip. The blade would stop moving about halfway, like this Jim Burke right here. It would stop about halfway. Had to use a good amount of wrist to get the thing open. But you know what I did? I kept the knife assembled. I took half a drop of Daiwa Real Oil on each washer, even less than that on the detent ball. Wiped off the excess, and that's how I got this backlash right here to flip. That's how I got this VSS right here to flip. And I also damn near lost my finger doing that with Neil Blackwood's skirmish. I didn't know any of this at the time. That was the first knife on Teflon. It didn't flip, so I just put some oil on it. I don't have it anymore, but it was my first great Teflon flipper after I put the oil on. It confused me quite a bit because it was an instant night and day kind of change. The thing dropped shut instantly when it wouldn't even flip before, and with that huge blade, it was a finger guillotine. But anyways, let's see. I had that same scenario happen a few times now, and those always end up being the best flippers. And it's always kind of funny when it happens because I get them at a huge discount. But I guess what I'm trying to say is you can get a fantastic action on Teflon. It's different, but it's great in its own way. Even when it's, let's say it's this smooth, like on this backlash right here. It's never going to drop shut like a Norseman. It's going to be different. And in my honest opinion, it feels a little bit classier. And that's not a stab at Grimsmo at all. I honestly think they're one of the best makers out there. But it's a difference between a card trunk that slams shut versus one that just has that little bit of hydraulic resistance letting it close softly. That might just be me though. Lots of people in the last few years, they've been chasing drop shut actions and fast flippers. That's just where the market's been headed. That's why ball bearings have basically taken over. Bearings basically give you a free action by default. They're the easier way out. You can still have a very good action on ball bearings even if things are a bit off with the construction. That's just the way it is. And that's why I'm thrilled to see some makers switching over. I'm not going to name names here, but some of them are just better designers than they are builders. Let's just put it that way. But when it comes to ones that have already nailed down their consistency, the ones that have had Teflon down to a science, it honestly feels like they're fixing something that wasn't broken to begin with. Like, I have a lot of respect for makers still doing things with Teflon. And that's because it's not easy. It's not the easy way out. Everything from the detent to the flipper geometry to washers themselves, all of that needs to be done right. Because you can't hide the flaws in a Teflon folder very easily. Something's off, it won't flip or it won't flick all the way out. Just as simple as that. I get something out of seeing that level of knife making. I don't know, I guess it's like the level of mastery or whatever, I guess. That sounds pretentious, but that's why this stuff is kind of here. That's because I respect that level of knife making. I mean, look at the makers here. You have Demko, you have Borka right here, you have Jim Burke, you have John Barker right here, David Mosier. Those are all some of the best in the game. Their knives are nothing short of perfect. None of these have even a hint of blade play, so I know all the pivots are tight. All of them open great. This Barker right here, it won't exactly flick very easily, but it's going for something different entirely. It's smooth the same way a Sebenza is smooth, and no one's going to say a Sebenza is like, no, it's a terrible knife because it's not smooth enough to flick out. No, it's a different kind of smoothness. But what I'm trying to say is, I think it says something when you see these guys here building knives on Teflon that are best in class. It takes a talented maker to pull this off, so I know it's not easy. But I don't want you to think you need a top-end custom or a rare collab to get a good Teflon action. You don't even need to go custom, honestly. On the high-end production side, you have Hinderer. So Hinderer was doing a great job with this stuff, especially in the later Gen 4 XM18s. Those were very solid, well-built knives. They flip better than anything else Hinderer had made it up to that point, and hell, they were just good flippers in general. Use some of that old XM18 3.5 technique, and this thing just rockets out like mad. Under that in the mid-range, let me just make some space right here. But yeah, under that in the mid-range, you kind of have Lion Steel. You can kind of see it right there, I think. But yeah, they made this DPX Hest right here. It's not very flicky, but it's just a good, solid working tool. It's smooth enough, and it's just It's a working functional knife. That's basically it. Doesn't have a flipper, so it doesn't really matter. Under that, you get on the budget end, you get the CRKT folding razor. This one really did surprise me with just how smooth it is. It's not competing with an XM18 anytime soon, but it is comparable to a Hest, and that's a damn good compliment for something that's only like 30 bucks. I'll give this one a solid recommendation anytime. But if you look at the trends, Teflon just seems to be dying. Even the makers that have been using it, and even some of the makers here, they've been moving away from it. Part of it's just market pressure. People demand bearings, so they just went with it. They just gave people what they wanted. Like, I had David Mosier's on bearings, I had Jim Burke's on bearings. Like, it's nothing new, it's just the way the market is. But like I was saying before, especially with these two guys right here, on it, okay, they're off screen. These two guys right here, Mosier and Burke, those two guys had Teflon flippers basically down to a science. The quality on their newer knives, it's still there, 100%, but it just feels like they fixed something that they kind of didn't really need to. It wasn't even broken to begin with. Like, maybe it's just me, but I like seeing people doing their own thing. Like, you see this Scout right here, and Jason Guthrie only builds his pivots using Teflon. He believes it's a better material, and that man sticks to his guns. And I actually think that was actually very literal. I'm pretty sure he owns a shooting range down in South Africa. But anyways, I can't argue with him. I get this in hand, it feels like a Sebenza that was basically built specifically for flicking. On the other side, and this is like kind of the polar opposite here, I look at Hinderer. I can't help but say I lost some respect there. Those late Gen 4 XM18 3.5s, like this one right here, they're basically perfect. He finally got them consistent. They flipped great, they locked up great, well, they always locked up great, but the detent wasn't finger breaking, but it's by no means light either. The thumb studs were usable, and actually great to use. It felt like it was Hinderer at their best. They had finally found the Goldilocks range for everything. And that's why it annoyed me so much when he caved and started adding extra unnecessary things to an already perfected design. Like, I look at this full track right here. After just using it for a little bit, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Now Rick is pandering with non-free spinning pivots that basically work themselves loose and require a huge amount of Loctite. He put in lock bar inserts to fix the perfect lockup that he's been known for over years, and the tri-way pivot right here, he finally put that in to get ball bearings on a knife that he always said ran better on Teflon. I mean, it functioned great without the bearings, and you know what? He's actually always argued for and defended his decision to use Teflon over all these years. The tri-way pivot just feels like a half measure to appease people. But you know what? I get it. It sells. As a businessman, you need to follow the money. You need to give the people what they want, even if they want it for the wrong reasons. But tell me this. Where is the flaw here? You spent all those years to perfect everything, just to throw it all away? You're the knife maker. You know your knives better than the public does. Take suggestions and improve. I'm not telling you to stay still here, but do your own thing. Too many makers out there are playing a game of follow the leader, and it grieves me to see Hinderer go the same way. Their knives are still top notch. I still trust them to make good knives, but it just seems like it goes against what they've stood for so long. They're not doing what they believe is best anymore. They're just doing what the market wants them to do. And just giving the people everything that they want, that's a race to the bottom. Because you end up losing yourself. You end up chasing trends and you end up being the same as any of the other 50 companies doing the same thing. You'll be disposable. Oh, what's the next trend? Oh, they're doing that trend now? I need to do the same thing. It's a slippery slope argument here, I get that, but what I'm trying to say is I want Hinderer to stay as far away from what I just said as possible. They're still an industry leader in my eyes. I want them to continue to stand out. And also in general, I'm just tired of the pandering. We get enough of that in real life. I don't want it in my hobby as well. I mean, how many times has Chris Reeve been asked to make a flipper You're not going to see Chris Reeve or Strider make a ball bearing flipper anytime soon, and that's another point. Some designs are just plain unsuited for bearings. I'm not even going to talk about gunk in the pivot or side-to-side rigidity here. That's never really affected me. I'm just talking about the feel here. And they just don't feel right on ball bearings sometimes. Like, take this Crusader Forge right here. This one's a Metro Viz T. It runs on Teflon, and it looks like they've completely switched the bearings lately. I mean, just look at it. It's not trying to be an art piece. It's never going to be an action showcase. It's just a hard-use tool, and it feels like one, as it should. So why the hell did we get GTC bearings on a Furious 4 Prey EX? I mean, the damn thing's a thick, overbuilt machete with a 5.5-inch coated blade. I handled a Tonto one before. If you just hold it like this, it already feels like the blade is fighting the detent ball. Give it the smallest shake, it sends the blade all the way out. Well, not all the way out, but it sends it about over here. It felt completely out of place. It didn't have a good action because the blade weighed half a ton and a detent was non-existent. That's just an example of bad knife making, but even the feel was completely off. The blade just flopped around. It didn't feel solid like it. This is supposed to feel solid. It's an overbuilt knife. But you know what? Also having that extra friction from the Teflon washers, that wouldn't have hurt either. It would have kept the blade in place a hell of a lot better, I'll tell you that. And it's stupid stuff like that that gets to me. It's inconsistent design. It doesn't make sense with what they're doing. So to all the people out there who are just part of this anti-Teflon crusade or whatever, you're not helping the industry out. You might think you are, but you're not. Just because you had a few cheap, badly made burgers, does that mean you're just gonna go out there and just completely write off burgers for the rest of your life and start screaming that from the rooftops? No. You're gonna find someone doing it right and you're gonna give them your money instead. It's the same concept here. So instead of just dismissing and saying, ugh, cheap plastic washers, actually use the knife. If it's badly done, ask for improvement. Ask for a better Teflon action. Don't just say stop using Teflon, tell them to do it better. And give some respect to the ones not choosing the easy way out. And just give some respect for the ones doing it right. Because as someone who has learned to appreciate a good Teflon action, I know for a fact that it can be done right. And just stop for a minute here, take a step back, and just realize the absurdity of all this. I'm spending 20 plus minutes here just talking about material on a folding knife pivot. At the end of the day, none of this matters to like 99% of us. Be real with yourself here. I'll bet you're not the kind of guy that needs to go out and service their folding knife out in the field. You're more likely to be an office drone or a suburban dad or just some dude who owns a fixed blade. Been talking for too long. Ask yourself this. What actually matters more to you? Are you after a good action? Or are you just the world's biggest fan of ball bearings? Do you want a good knife? Or do you just want phosphor bronze washers on everything? I talked a lot today about things that just don't matter. Like I talked about corrosion on phosphor bronze, wear on the titanium and steel from the washers. When is that ever going to kill your folder? Everything in folders has been appropriated from somewhere else. The stuff was designed for industrial grade machines. Scale it down to like the scale of a folding knife, and just imagine how much of that is lost in translation. None of this really matters. I mean, how does you sitting down fidgeting with your folder while watching a movie compare to a machine running at 2000 RPM for an hour? People just care way too much about the small stuff. Stuff that's never gonna really cause you a real problem. What you really need to ask is it done well? And do I like it? Those are the two things I ask myself about every new knife. And that partially comes down to experience, but I think asking that makes a lot more sense here. You might not like the feel of a knife running on Teflon, and I'm not trying to change your mind here. That's not what this long video is about. I want people to think for themselves. You have a right to your own preference, but just realize that it is just your preference. It's not some overarching revelation about what should and shouldn't be on a folding knife. Stop caring about what your knife is running on and ask this instead. Is it done right? Whether that means right for you, right for the price, or just right for your collection. You know what? I just don't care, man. Just let me have my Teflon in peace. Take care.